from a holiday resort, which is the best place to chair a session from. So it's my pleasure to invite Wenda, please.
Thank you, Afe, and welcome, colleagues. I am enjoying myself at Serena Kilaguni. I just watched about 50 elephants come to the watering hole. And now I'm taking a break so that I can work on this. I was been listening and they're very good conversations. I think our colleagues who are going to have this session know the drill by now. It's 10 minutes. You give us the highlights. Make sure that you capture the highlights so that the others can see what you're doing, as Afe said, so that you can shine your eyes and get to see who else is doing what. Many of us who have been in this project know that a lot of collaborations come out of these projects. People from different countries, different groups come in. So without much ado, we will go straight to Sibanda, who will be followed by Kwaramba, Mugambi, and when we'll end with Solomons. So Sibanda, you have 10 minutes. Introduce yourself, your team, your work, the highlights of your work, and then we'll give you 10 minutes starting now.
Sibanda, could you adjust your screen? We are only seeing your cap and the roof, except if that was intentional. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's needed.
And please go to.
Thank you, Chair.
Sibanda, go to PowerPoint.
With the, yeah, that's a PowerPoint, and I've started with the.
No, it shouldn't show us your notes on the side. It should just be one screen. So
use a slideshow mode.
Yes.
Okay. Slideshow. Where is that one?
Or you just go to the bottom. Go to the bottom just before you see 70%. Click that button that looks like a wine glass.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, I'm told F5. Press your F5. All right, great.
Okay, thank you. That's our team. I have started with the last slide. You will notice that that's the last slide with the details of the teams. But I am now going to the first slide where our topic, all right, our project title appears. So that's our project title: African Spiritualities, Health and Well-being in the face of COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. So that's the team, like I said, and then maybe that will serve as the introduction and background. Maybe all those maybe general issues that COVID pandemic is a problem today, the world over, and also in Zimbabwe, where maybe there are a lot of uncertainties, of course, records of death, loss of sources of livelihood, maybe all showing that maybe we have a problem at hand. It has caused uncertainties and disruptions. And maybe where religion comes in is that maybe we are trying to see, maybe to test how religion and spirituality here, having been noted already by people like Mbiti, that maybe Africans are notoriously religious. So we are trying to see how maybe the life experiences of people in Zimbabwe under COVID-19 may have been influenced by their religious and spiritual orientations, which might have made them to rethink about their health and well-being and other life issues. So as part of the research questions and sub-questions. We are saying here in face of COVID-19, it is timely to examine the following broad question. In what ways have religion and African spirituality shaped and maybe the conceptualization of COVID-19 pandemic and the search for well-being in the face of the pandemic in the Zimbabwean context? And those are some of the sub-questions. In what ways do religious leaders weave COVID-19 into their sermons, liturgy, and rituals? How do religious leaders explain the origins of and remedies to COVID-19 pandemic? In what ways are health-seeking behaviors changing maybe among religious people in the face of COVID-19? How are African spiritualities shaping responses to COVID-19 pandemic? So in the context of the disruptive nature of the pandemic and maybe issues of the unknown, how do people tap into spirituality to make sense of their everyday lives? So those will be the sub-questions. And then maybe we have there the aim and objectives. Against the above raised questions and sub-questions, the study aims to understand how religion and spirituality, particularly indigenous and African Christian beliefs, experiences, and responses are being deployed in times of COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. So the objectives of the study are to, one, identify the beliefs, experiences, and the responses of indigenous and African Christian practitioners to COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. And then two, to elucidate the complex intersection between spirituality, pandemics, and health-seeking behaviors in the context of COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. And then lastly, to evaluate the efficacy of alternative knowledges and belief systems in the context of COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. Then we come to research methodology. We are using a qualitative research design where maybe a number of these other methodological aspects will be considered: ethnographical, sociological, historical, as well as phenomenological approaches will be used in this project. For data collection, we have questionnaires, particularly to look at maybe the faith-based organizations that we will approach, key informant interviews with spiritual leaders, focus group discussions with ordinary community members or believers of different religious orientations. In this case, we are using African indigenous religion and Christian, African Christian religious beliefs. And then field observations of community members, then documentary analysis of print and electronic media, where maybe we will also have a chance to consult with our interviewees if they have archival materials, some documents or constitutions in their churches and organizations, amongst other documents there. And then data analysis, a thematic approach of emerging patterns will be used or will be done. And then the anticipated outcomes and outputs, the project anticipates to produce the following deliverables. Amongst others, we have awareness campaign on the interface between African spiritualities, science, and COVID-19 using Great Zimbabwe University campus radio. So that will be a medium to try to disseminate some of these campaigns. Then 3 workshops and 1 final culminating conference, peer-reviewed article or book chapter, policy brief, network platform for theology institutes, curriculum reform for theology modules, new curriculum materials like case study materials, articles, book, then textbooks, web pages, dissertations. Theology graduates is among the outcomes or outputs. Then introduction of theology research seminars. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Sibanda, for giving us 2 more extra minutes. I will go straight to Kwaramba. Kwaramba, are you there? You may bring down your slide, Sibanda. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Kwaramba, you're next.
Thank you so
There
much.
you go.
Greetings to everyone. We are so grateful for the opportunity that has been given to us. I will go straight into our presentation, which is entitled Deniwa, interpreted I'm Fed Up, Exploring Pentecostal Notions of Singlehood and Femininity in Zimbabwe. Our project advisor is Professor Damaris Pastau. And this lady here you see on the screen is the founder of the group Deniwa, and they are also known as Daughters of Virtue. And they believe in their group as being a family where prayer is their priority. And I am the project leader, being a theologian. My colleagues are Recompanswe Mate, who is a sociologist and anthropologist, and Joylene Gwara, who is a philosopher. We also had Tapiwa Mapranga, who passed on a couple of weeks ago, was going to contribute to this presentation. But thank you for acknowledging a demise, and may your soul rest in peace. The background of our and significance of our project: it is firmly located within African Women Theologies. It grapples with the issue of understanding a unique Zimbabwean Pentecostal movement, Deniwa, which is I'm Fed Up, and its implications on women's health and well-being in Zimbabwe. As alluded earlier, it is founded by Prophetess Memory Matimbire, the woman I showed in our topic page. The movement is also appropriated as Daughters of Virtue International. Essentially, it is a Pentecostal movement from a woman to women, in quote and unquote. The central question that this project interrogates is how does grounded theology facilitate a deeper appreciation of a peculiar Pentecostal women's movement in the context of innovation and competition in an environment dominated by male prophets. There are other questions that follow that will guide this project research. To what extent does the combination of grounded theology and social sciences strategies enable a more rounded understanding of the phenomenon and contribute towards enhancing women's health and well-being in Zimbabwe? How do the male prophets who are Pentecostals and their teams who have enjoyed the market dominance respond to the arrival of a woman competitor? And how does Prophetess Matimbire herself address the critiques that she faces as a new entrant into the well-subscribed prophecy, healing, and deliverance sector? To what extent does the Deniwa movement enable us to appreciate innovation and competition within the religious market, as Adogame in 2000 would say, in Zimbabwe in particular, and in Africa in general? How does the findings and the developments that we have be expressed in the curriculum transformation in order to equip the graduates of theology in Zimbabwe and in Africa, like Manze in 2000 and Chitando in 2010 would say, be equipped and ready to serve? What can the policymakers and implementers and development partners discern about women's greatest needs and security concerns from an analysis of the Deniwa movement? The available scholarly literature on women founders of Pentecostal movements, as well as women in African Pentecostalism, is quite informative. In particular, we can single out here our project advisor, Professor Pastau's doctoral thesis in 2014, which provides detailed analysis of women, Pentecostal women leaders in Kenya. However, there are related materials from Nigeria, Kalu, Wariboko, and Isiche. In Ghana, there's Sutil and Novieto. In South Africa, there's Friam Up. And in Zimbabwe, the late Mapranga, and also my work in 2009, confirms the key role of women in Pentecostalism. Crucially, my colleague Mate in 2000 has highlighted the importance of fertility to women in Zimbabwean Pentecostalism. The study complements the extant literature by investing in grounded theology, seeking to understand the Ndadiniwa group. What is it that they are fed up with? How is being fed up expressed? What are the bodily repertoires, idioms, and biblical texts, etc., being used to express the angst and frustration? How does the Ndadiniwa group assert itself, extract and retain members in a heavily contested spiritual environment? What motivates the men to attend the prayers organized by Ndadiniwa? I must say that there are some men that are invited, male preachers. Prophetess Matimbire invites to preach, to lead prayers in this group, and what motivates them to agree to come and do is being asked. What is we hear? Prophetess Matimbire's preaching style, and what is it that attracts the audience? Can one identify political protest in the Ndadiniwa? So these are some of the research questions that will help us and guide us in our research. By utilizing social scientific approaches in grounded theology, the study will unveil the factors that prompt tens of thousands of women, including top officials and professionals, to attend the service of a group that says it is fed up. What are the social, spiritual, economic, political, and personal and other factors that motivate women to affiliate with Ndadiniwa as clients, day visitors, or members? What does the movement seek to achieve when it insists that it is not a church? That's what they insist on. But after attending its activities, one must go back to their own traditional church. How do the biblical texts, such as the narratives of the daughters of Zelophehad, Hannah and Penina, receive a fresh interpretation in the application of Matimbire's over? Apart from the communicating with God, how else can we understand the deployment of prayer by the Ndadiniwa prayer group? On our hypothesis about the research, what the research will find, the study assumes the following: that Prophet Matimbire and her group engage in innovative practices with special focus on women's existential and social needs to become significant players on Zimbabwe's heavily contested spiritual market. Also that the entry by prophetess and her group generates competition and resistance from pre-existing religious entities, including from within the Pentecostal fold, but also including other Christian groups, as well as ATR and Islam.
1 minute.
Let me move maybe to the methodologies. We will adopt a mixed methods approach, beginning with the details of the existing literature, and we use quantitative data using questionnaires, qualitative data through focus group and in-depth interviews. And grounded theology guards against what Stephen said, top-down process, where theologians dream up his or her theological ideas in solitude. Instead, the grounded theology promotes bottom-up approach, where theological process is initiated. aided and nurtured by the whole people of God. Lastly, life happens on the ground, and to the ground, researchers must return. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwaramba. Mugambi, you're up. Mugambi, are you there?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I believe you can see me.
Yes, we can see your project and see you.
Thank you very much. I'm Kyama Mugambi from Kenya, and our project is titled Alternative Kinship Structures within Emerging African Ecclesiology. And so our project is, we're investigating emerging kinship structures that are represented by what we are calling a community-based phenomena among urban African Pentecostals. The background, and I won't rehash it here because several projects have already brought that up, but it's basically to say the background is that kinship is very important for us in terms of African religion and culture. And it forms the anchor for society upon which all the other things hang. As it's often said, you know, I am because we are, and it illustrates how central kinship is and how communality is grounded within our philosophical presuppositions of our society. And our observation is that communities expressed in kinship, has implications in lived theology of African Christians. So in our study, we are curious about how urban Pentecostals in Kenya reconceptualize community within their traditional kinship, when their traditional kinship structures are facing the pressures of modernity. And so we're limiting ourselves to urban Pentecostals where emerging African ecclesiologies are found. But the other thing is that we're also curious about how these communities reorganize themselves to meet social and spiritual needs using ecclesial means, or using their church groupings. And thirdly, we're also curious about how these communities use traditional African values, one of which I've talked about, Ubuntu or Umuntu, as was mentioned a little earlier, to put together or create new flourishing kinship structures despite urbanization, despite modernism. Our curiosity is really about a phenomenon of how that kinship structure presents itself, and we are calling it spiritual parenthood. Many would recognize it as the mommy and daddy pastor phenomenon. That is the parental aspect of Christian community that seems to be highlighted, as one of the most conspicuous example of emerging African Christian kinships. Now, this spiritual parenthood presents itself in various situations, and three of those are important for us. And the first is, of course, church worship gatherings. And so that's one of the places which, when you go, you're going to hear terms like, mommy pastor, daddy pastor, or this is my spiritual father. Just today, I went into a funeral meeting, and the term was used, this is my spiritual father, or, this is my spiritual mother, and so on. And the other area is in church small groups. Churches put together small groups primarily for the members' spiritual nurture, or the need is for spiritual nurture. But some of these groups, then go on ahead and have other things that go on inside there that imitate kinship and family, right through to parents and siblings and that kind of setting. One of the other places that you find communal values coming through are what we call rites of passage programs. We will not focus much on these, but these factor in some of the communities that we will look at. And these are experiences that are put together for people, that is, young people, especially those in teenage, to go through those in a Christian setting, so that they can graduate into teenagehood and young adulthood. Now, we're going to, in order to narrow and focus our study, we're going to be using grounded theory to investigate some of these, this phenomenon and these occurrences in three different kinds of communities. The first is a church, where the church has a very overt terms for the pastors, and the pastors also themselves use those terms and consider themselves as spiritual children of others. This is Jubilee Christian Church, whose main congregation, there are several congregations, whose main congregation is a young urban Pentecostal gathering that is in Nairobi. A second type of community would be the Christian unions. For those of us who know some of the history of Christian unions, is that they started from an evangelical background, but we're going to be looking at these communities, Christian unions, which now use some of these terms for their elected leaders. And so we're going to look at Kenyatta University Christian Union. And in a unique way, the student community exhibits Pentecostal features, but also encourages its members to submit to peers who are elected seasonally. So all of them are peers in terms of their education. But when they assume elective posts, they become mothers and fathers among their colleagues. A third community is Christ is the Answer Ministry, which is different. It's a Pentecostal church and does not actually use familiar terms within its episcopal leadership. Now, this is a Pentecostal community that has episcopalized, but has organized its community into small groups, which then fulfill the function for mutual care in ways that are very similar to families. So our hope is that with the grounded research, we can map out this kind of kinship's contribution to the social, spiritual, psychological, and financial health of the Christians. And our hope is also to engage and to try and draw out the theological implications that we can bring to bear from our findings. Our team, that's our team there. We thought that it would be nice for you to get to see them. Our team is actually represented over here on the amongst the participants. The team members are Dr. Paul Mwangi, who obtained his PhD from the University of Nairobi. He's a lecturer at Southeastern Kenya University. He teaches history of Christian mission. And he brings for us, Christian responses on urbanization, global ethics, and violence. And that he's third from left. In the middle there, we have our able facilitator, Professor Mwenda Tarangu, who's facilitating right now, but is our project advisor. The lady there is Dr. Kihuha, Mary Kihuha, who obtained a PhD from Yonsei University in Korea. And she sheds light for us on new religious movement and brings for us gender perspectives and Pentecostalism. Next to her, we have Stephen Kiyoko, whose PhD studies are from Stellenbosch, and is a lecturer as well. I should have said Dr. Kihuha teaches at Park University. And then we have Dr. we have Stephen Kiyoko, who teaches at Southeastern Kenya University. And he researches Pentecostalism as well. And he looks at socio-political Christian engagement, political theology, peace studies. Not in the picture, but you'll see them in just a moment, are Dr. Edith Kaeli, who also obtained her PhD from University of Nairobi. She brings African cultural studies, she brings gender perspectives as well. We believe that we cannot discuss kinship without looking at gender perspectives. And we appreciate the role that these ladies bring into our study. And then we have Okello Ogera, who's a lecturer at St. Paul's University and researches new religious movements. I'm Kyama Mugambi, and I obtained my PhD from Africa International University. And just one picture there, we talk about kinship, we enjoy time together and try to build family together as well.
All right, I assume you're done, Mugambi?
Yes, I'm done. I'm done, sir.
All right, thank you. Solomons, you're up.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, post your PowerPoint if you have one.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Firstly, also thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Our research topic is entitled Towards an Eco-Theology of Fisheries Management, an ethnographic investigation of the religious dimensions of small-scale fishery practices on the west coast of South Africa. We've got a transdisciplinary team. Of course, myself, I teach systematic theology and moral philosophy at the University of the Western Cape. And our co-principal investigator is Dr. Samantha Williams, who is a faculty member in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Stellenbosch University. We also are supported by Mr. Nicholas Waldeck, who is a fisher based in Lambert's Bay, but also a founding member of Abalobby, which is a fisher-driven social enterprise, very important member of the group. And of course, we are in the very capable hands of Dr. Henrietta Nyamjo, who is quite knowledgeable about the topic, which is, in our first meeting, we were quite excited to also hear some of her experiences dealing with similar topics on the rest of the continent. So quite exciting stuff there. So in South Africa, rural communities have long relied on the environment to sustain their livelihoods. Along with this, religious and customary beliefs that foster conservation bound these communities to ecosystems and assist in the preservation and management of natural resources. In this context, fishing and fisheries management is deeply embedded in the history, identity, and experience of communities, particularly on the west coast of South Africa. However, legislative changes imposed by the South African government, and here we're referring to the democratic government, including restrictions on fishing rights, has had an adverse effect on how communities engage with the marine resource. This is further exacerbated by decades of marginalization through colonial and apartheid dispensations. The post-apartheid fisheries reform process, which pay very little attention to the plight of small-scale fishers, only served to worsen an already fragile situation. It is for this reason that access and rights to fisheries resources have become a highly contested subject, where traditional fishing communities have equated the curtailment of fishing rights as an infringement on their traditional way of life, particularly because the history, identity, and experience of small-scale fishing communities include a cosmology that foregrounds a deep connection between fishing and a theology affirming an intimate relationship with God and the people who benefit from the marine resource. This is where we come in. Current research in South Africa on the livelihoods of fishers does not provide for a religious dimension associated with the fishing practice. In the absence of such an identity marker, one cannot fully appreciate what is at stake as far as the interconnected fields of environmental conservation and rural livelihoods is concerned. In other words, we believe that a greater appreciation of the religiosity of fishers will unlock some of the complexities linked to governmental concerns in relation to the livelihoods of rural fishing communities. What we are calling for here is for the religion and spirituality of small-scale fishing communities to receive greater attention across the interconnected fields of environmental conservation and how this could inform fisheries management systems. In the light of this, the proposed study is located at the intersection of African theology and fisheries management systems, which places it in the realm of eco-theological exploration. We propose the need for the religion and spirituality of small-scale fishing communities to receive greater attention across the interconnected fields of environmental conservation and how this could inform fisheries management systems. We take a transdisciplinary as opposed to an interdisciplinary approach because the discourse on the religious dimensions of small-scale fishery practices transcends narrow theological and human geographical approaches. In doing so, we necessitate the insights of various stakeholders at a local level, particularly those who form an essential part of communities in Lambert's Bay, Elands Bay, and Ebenezer, where this research will be undertaken. In the interest of transdisciplinarity, the particular problems that we seek to address could be characterized in the following ways. Firstly, from a theological perspective, as an integral part of culture, society, and identity, religion and spirituality provide a powerful cosmological, ethical, and normative framework that shape how small-scale fishing communities view and relate to each other and the natural world. Given the complex nature of religion and spirituality can be challenging to define as well as distinguish from one another. In this context, scholars like Van Beek distinguishes between religion as an instrumentalized set of beliefs and practices regarding the spiritual realm and spirituality as a relationship with the supernatural or spiritual realm that provides meaning and a basis for personal and communal reflection, decisions, and action. From this vantage point, religion and spirituality are viewed in tandem. Moreover, religion in general is understood to encompass spirituality. This prompts one to take a more functional approach to examine the role of religion, which focuses on what religion does in this context, as opposed to a more substantive approach focusing on what religion is. Secondly, from a human geographical perspective, this study is aimed at addressing the gap in fisheries management approaches in South Africa, where the role of religion and spirituality is not taken into account when assessing small-scale fisheries practices. This is done in the interest of highlighting the key ways that religious dimensions impact fisheries use, management, and are thus an integral component to achieving both social and ecological objectives. Traditional approaches in governing natural resources, human interaction have seen an emphasis placed on top-down approaches where the role and inputs of the state have taken priority. These approaches have not resulted in the desired outcomes, and fisheries management and conservation in South Africa is still largely delinked from understanding the needs and values of small-scale fishing communities. So just to wrap up, on this basis, the problem that will be investigated in this study may be formulated as follows. How does religion in the traditional small-scale fishing communities of Lambert's Bay, Elands Bay, and Ebenezer inform local approaches to natural resource use management and conservation in contemporary South Africa. The question prompts further questions as to what are religious elements, including things such as worldviews, rituals, that is contained in small-scale fishing practices. What are their origins and how are they enacted in fishing practices and livelihoods? What is the relevance of these sustaining contemporary fishing practices and conservation and management efforts? We will employ methods that are considered standard in qualitative research studies to address our objectives. The following research methods have been considered: selection of 1, case studies, 2, field work, 3, interviews, which will include oral histories, and then 4thly, meetings and workshops. While it is easy for academics to overstate the importance of our work, ranging from arguments that an idea has never been studied before to the significance of the work on a broader scale, we suggest a more modest yet important undertaking, that is to give voice to the religious experiences of people, in this case fishers, and the communities who have, for the most part, have lived on what liberation theologians would call on the underside of history. So yes, it is political, but yet again, there are not many issues regarding faith in South Africa that is not. So that is what we will be undertaking for the next, for the foreseeable future, and with regards to the project. So in my native tongue, baie dankie. Thank you very much.
Baie dankie, Solomons. Asante Mugambi. What is it? Majita, Sibanda, and Kwaramba. We're looking forward to hearing what our colleagues will say regarding your 4 presentations. The first one was by Sibanda, looking at how is religion shaping responses to COVID-19, and are there emerging health-seeking behaviors among people that they're looking at in Zimbabwe. Then we were told about Prophetess, who is leading a movement that is challenging a space that has been male-dominated. Why is this possible? And I saw there was a question, Kwaramba, that you were asked about how do hypotheses work with grounded theory. I hope you can respond to that. Mugambi, looking at kinship, that is a little alternative to what we are used to in terms of filial and blood relationships now happening in church. And we've heard lastly from Solomons, who has talked about eco-theology, how religious traditions shaping resource management among fishers. So we have about 10-15 minutes of questions, and we will take a first round of questions, specifically asking the individual members. Who is ready to go? I'll keep looking at the text, the chat, so that I can tell. And also presenters, please do the same and take up the questions. Maybe Kwaramba, you want to talk about how does hypothesis work with grounded theory?
Thank you so much. I think we are still in the early stages of our research, and should we continue with the quantitative? It was supposed to be for the quantitative research. Should we continue with the quantitative approach? We will use that one, but we might consider discussing that with our project advisor to see whether we will continue or we'll scrap it off, considering also the stage of the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic in terms of our field work and the research, we might need to revisit it. Thank you so much.
I saw a question for two of the first messages from Jim Speaker